Welcome to Remarkable Retail Podcast, Season 7, Episode 8. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
In our second of 3 episodes, recorded live in the Vegas Grocery Shop 2023 podcasting studio, our Vantage podcasting studio, our guest is Barbara Connors, Vice President, Strategy and Acceleration at 8451.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this episode. First of all, Barbara's super insightful and interesting. We kind of touch on this a little bit, this idea of creating kind of the one-to-one future. We've been talking about leveraging personalization, leveraging data for so many years, and I think it's happening more and more. And what Barbara's doing at 8451, this division of super interesting division of Kroger, is quite fascinating. Now, just going to point out really quickly, keen listeners may notice a slight difference in audio quality during the interview. We had a little bit of a technical gremlin. So this episode was actually recorded in 2 parts. Not super noticeable, but just want to, I guess in the spirit of full transparency, mention that to people.
Yeah, she was very kind and joined us back on the mic a second time. So thanks again to Barbara for doing that. All right, well, let's get right into the news. I'm sensing headwinds in the U.S. economy. We've got everything's the government shutdown. I mean, we're hearing about it up here in Canada, and there's a whole bunch of other things going on. So share what you're observing around the economic or the state of the economy.
Well, there's a few things that are very specific to the U.S., so I'll go through them quickly because given our international audience, it may not be super fascinating. But yeah, we're, who knows, by the time this episode comes out, we'll see what happens over the weekend. There's this big risk that the U.S. government is going to shut down, and that would not be awesome for the economy, I guess, depending upon how long that might last. Our government here can't seem to get out of its own way. That could be a big issue. We also had some news. Well, another thing that's going on very specific to the U.S. is the UAW, the United Auto Workers strike. Auto is obviously a huge industry. If that strike persists, that could add some headwinds. Consumer confidence is down again, went down quite a lot, which is the 4th consecutive month, or it's the lowest in 4 months. Home sales have been tough for a while, most noticeably because of the interest rates. So, a lot of these things just keep kind of piling up in addition to stuff we've been talking about for the last several months.
Right. Now, we also had a big Amazon announcement, right, from the Justice Department. These things are all happening at the same time, it seems. Maybe it's just coincidence, but any thoughts on that? Yeah,
Lena Horne, I think that's her name. I feel like when I said that, that's not quite right. Lena,
at the jazz singer, I think.
Federal, yes, right, exactly. So that's not right anyway. Lena, my best friend at the FTC, announced a long rumored antitrust suit against Amazon. There's definitely different schools of thought as to how strong the case is. There's one group, I think, that sees this as quite obvious, particularly around Amazon's relationship with its marketplace sellers, that they leverage their dominance in that part of the business, so the kind of the B2B part of the business, to get certain behaviors out of their marketplace sellers to, in essence, fix pricing. Then there's also the consumer side of it. And that's the one I think that's a little less clear, because I think it's pretty obvious that Amazon has brought a lot of convenience to the market, that in general prices are lower because of Amazon's position in the marketplace. And there are plenty of other places for consumers to go to get many of the products that Amazon sells. So it's a pretty complicated case, and definitely different schools of thought as to how strong the case is. So this is obviously going to take a while to resolve itself, but it's a pretty big move in terms of the Biden administration going after kind of big tech. There's also things going on with Google and perhaps others. So definitely something to watch. And then we had another piece of Amazon news, totally unrelated to the FTC action, is that they're planning to invest up to $4 billion in an AI startup. It's kind of amazing that you could have that kind of investment in a startup called Anthropic. This is considered to be kind of Amazon's first big foray in an attempt to compete more directly with Microsoft and Alphabet in the generative AI sector. So this is really an AWS initiative. And as part of the deal, Amazon's getting a minority stake in Anthropic for $1.25 billion. They've got the option to increase that investment up to the $4 billion number that I just mentioned. In exchange, one of the things that Anthropic is doing is AWS will be their primary provider for their cloud infrastructure. And then Anthropic is going to give some AWS customers early access to some of the features that they already have and presumably will be developing over the next couple of years. So, once again, Amazon, with its vast scope, making some moves.
I was a little surprised by the announcement. Not that Amazon surprised me by investing in companies, but I had heard maybe last year or some point that there are more people working on AI at Amazon than like anything else practically. So I'm just kind of surprised they didn't develop it themselves, that they went to a startup, because they've been really focused on it. So I guess it's just, it just speaks to innovation and where innovation comes from, even in big companies. Any thoughts on that? Like, that struck me as, Amazon generally builds more than buys. But what did you think?
Well, I think they do a mix. You could certainly look at this as, even though $4 billion sounds like a lot of money, it's really not a lot of money to Amazon. And at this point, it's just that initial minority stake. So I think it's creating some optionality. So they may just be kind of hedging their bets. There's definitely kind of a land grab thing going on in the world of AI. So I'm sure there's pressure for them to accelerate what they're doing and to perhaps diversify their options. But and by the way, it's Lena Khan. I don't want to endure the wrath of Khan by getting her name wrong. So I had the intern working on that while we were recording. Lena Khan. Yes. No. Yeah.
All right. News coming out of Target, and this is all connected. There's a few points of news on LP. Of course, it's been a discussion point for a while. What did you make of Target closing 9 stores?
Well, I promised last week that we wouldn't spend every episode on retail theft, and so
here we are.
Yeah, here we are. Well, I think it's a pretty interesting story. So, a couple things going on. Yeah, Target announced that they're closing 9 stores, urban stores in I think 4 cities, citing both the increase in retail theft, particularly from organized crime, as well as worries about consumer safety. I think a couple of things are going on here. One is that I think this is basically a cry for help. If you think about the causes, like the underlying causes of some of the increases in theft, you've got everything from the organized crime. You've got, you could argue, relatively lax policing and legislation in some communities that don't make the consequences of theft
Prop
not as high as
I think
it might be. Yeah. So you've got that. So I think if you think about what retailers can do to manage this issue, there aren't that many things really that are within their control, right? Mm-hmm. So to say, hey, we need help from governments, from municipalities, perhaps trying to get other retailers like big important retailers like Walmart, Costco, perhaps to join in this. I think it's that's part of what Brian Cornell and Target are trying to do. I don't want to be cynical about it because I take them at their word, but I think this could be a bit of a smokescreen. And what I mean by that is, and I think we talked about this actually on an episode of the pod, part of, in the context of smaller store strategy, Target's been embarking on a smaller store city target strategy for many, many years. So this was a way of growing more outlets, but particularly in urban areas. And that strategy is very challenged, not just because of the cost of operating, which is generally high in urban areas, but you've got cost of labor going up, but you've got this theft issue. But you have, I'm sure, a big hit to the revenue of these stores, largely because of work from home. We've still got office occupancy, which isn't just urban offices. This is all urban offices. But we've talked about some of the cities where the daytime traffic is, only 45, 50, 60% of what it used to be. So, I think a strategy that they saw driving a lot of growth has hit a wall, both because of the challenges in revenue as well as the increased cost of operating. So I think we have to, again, not that the issues they're pointing out aren't real, but I think this is giving them some air cover for basically saying, this strategy is not, going to work for us because of some things that weren't anticipated, COVID, primarily when they embarked upon it.
Yeah, I don't know if the NRF put out a study there, I guess now an annual study of loss prevention, and it may validate what you're saying, because at the high level, the top notes are that the percentage of theft shrink. We should be clear on shrink versus theft hasn't changed. Now, qualitatively, the retailer said it's got more violent, more aggressive. I'll put a link in the show notes for that, and you can kind of read. Listeners can read that, but it's just interesting context around at the high end, the numbers aren't changing as much as you would think perceptually by the amount of media coverage or the amount of lines of the earnings statements it occupies. All right, let's move off of loss prevention and let's talk about earnings for a little bit. Nike's earnings out. What did you make of them?
Yeah, we had three that I thought were worth just touching on, perhaps one more than the other. Nike, they beat actually on their earnings, but essentially their sales were pretty anemic, down a little bit in North America, up a little bit internationally. So, I think this is a function, as I think we've touched on before, a lot more competition in the space, particularly in the footwear business from brands like Hoka and On Running. They did get their inventory better in line. That's been a concern for several quarters, and it now appears that they're going into the fourth quarter in better position. But, selling, largely discretionary products, I think we're seeing that challenge pretty consistently, not only in the U.S., but in other markets. Same kind of story with Costco, also basically flat sales. They did a little bit better on earnings. This focus on getting costs out, I think, is really what's driving that. Their grocery business was solid, but they pointed out that the discretionary categories were down. So I think this is just the pattern we continue to see from just about everybody. The other interesting thing, and they're not a public company, so we don't have nearly as much detail, but JCPenney put out a report on how they're doing. And I have to say, I'm getting a little PTSD from this because of what I consider kind of the Sears vibes that Penny's is putting out. I think we talked about on the podcast at one point when they were talking about how their traffic was up a lot. Yeah. That I was like, I don't know, like something doesn't add up for me. Well, now we've got some numbers, and yes, their traffic was up, but their sales were down 10% for the quarter. Now think about what that means. I mean, we don't know exactly, right? But if your traffic was up considerably, but your sales were down 10%, that means either your conversion was terrible, or I guess, and it could be a little bit of both, your average order went down a lot.
Yeah, your AUR went down.
Right? Yeah. So, I think this is sales down 10% is much worse than the rest of the department stores, which have been down.
It's a big number.
So they're clearly losing market share. Yeah. The traffic being up, I think that, they put a lot of effort into marketing. They've been making a big deal about their new beauty initiative. So if you're getting traffic in there and people aren't converting, that suggests, I think, some pretty challenging issues. Now, they did call out some success in cost cutting. Their inventory is down. Of course, it could be that they're suffering from out of stocks. That's another possible explanation for poor conversion. So I don't necessarily
finding the stuff to buy.
So I don't necessarily look at that as a good sign. So now they've got, because of the bankruptcy filing they went through, they don't have a lot of debt. They basically don't pay any rent. So their cost structure is such that, they're not hemorrhaging cash because of this sales decrease, and because of their ownership structure, there's a lot of interest in, kind of keeping them afloat. So I don't think this suggests we're going to suddenly see a lot of store closings, but definitely a very poor trajectory.
Let's finish off with, I don't know what to make of these things. GameStop names a new CEO. GameStop's a meme now. There's a movie about it. What do you make of all this?
Well, so there's this guy, Ryan Cohen, who I would say has kind of a checkered history. He made his money, as far as I know, from being one of the founders of Chewy. Also has been, kind of a hedge fundish sort of guy, getting involved with, for example, Bed Bath & Beyond, and then also GameStop. So, Yeah, GameStop's been on this wild ride in terms of their valuation. They basically were for like if you go on to Yahoo Finance or whatever and look at the 5-year trend in the stock price, it's quite extraordinary because you've got like 3 years of it being at a very low level, and then it takes off like crazy.
Like the Swiss Alps?
Yes. And because of this meme stock thing, which I still don't totally understand, but basically, people that don't know anything about stocks getting excited about stocks and the price going up. And then, of course, eventually people realize that this is nothing, and the stock kind of crashes back down to earth. So you've got that whole backdrop to this thing. Well, anyway, he was, I think, the acting chairman or something for a while. Now he's stepped in to be CEO and basically has said that we being GameStop, it's kind of an interesting email that people got their hands on if you want to read something quite, similarly a wild ride. The email's kind of a wild ride. But the main thing that he talked about was that the company needs to engage in extreme frugality because without extreme frugality, the survival of the company as an issue. So
no more muffins at the meetings, I guess.
Apparently not. So, I mean, obviously GameStop has had their business impacted by the shift to, all things digital essentially, and streaming and all those kinds of things. They've tried to diversify a bit, but mostly the diversification seems to be adding a bunch of random stuff to their stores, which I'm not sure is a compelling strategy. So we shall see. But I think let's just say the heat is on at GameStop.
Well, I'm looking forward to the movie that's about the meme stocks. Canadian Seth Rogen is in it, so there you go. There's my episode.
There's your Canadian reference. Can't get out without a Canadian reference.
All right. Well, that's the news. Let's get to our really fantastic interview with Barbara Connors from 8451.
Well, Barbara Connors, we're excited to have you join us on the Remarkable Retail Podcast. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about, so let's just jump in. But before we kind of get into the, content portion of the program, could you just quickly tell us a little bit about yourself, your backgrounds, personal and professional journey, what you do for a living, those kinds of things?
I lead strategy and acceleration for the Commercial Insights and Loyalty Group at 8451. I got my master's of marketing research and marketing degrees from the University of Georgia, so go Dogs, and have spent my career in and around consumer insights. I spent 7 years at dunnhumby USA and have been with 8451 for the past 8, having moved over when Kroger acquired us in 2015. In my current role, I am responsible for several centers of excellence, including commercial solutions, marketing and thought leadership, and long-range planning.
Excellent. Well, we're going to dig into what 8451 is about and some of the things you're working on. But as you mentioned, 8451 is part of Kroger. Now, lots of folks in our audience will know exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about Kroger, but we do have an international audience. So just quickly for folks that may not be as familiar with Kroger at a high level, could you just kind of give everybody a little bit of reminder or insight as to what Kroger is about?
Kroger is an American retailer. We operate under a number of banners in the U.S. We've got more than 2,700 stores, and we serve 11 million customers daily through a seamless shopping experience. We focus on connecting customers with fresh, affordable food that they need to thrive. And as part of this commitment, Kroger works to create communities free from hunger and waste through our Zero Hunger, Zero Waste initiative.
Very nice. Well, let's dig into now to what 8451 is about and some of the things you're working on there.
So 8451 is a retail data science, insights, and media company. As I mentioned before, we were acquired by Kroger in 2015. So we are a wholly owned subsidiary. And what we do is we apply cutting edge science to our first party data asset that has more than 62 million households. And we really use that to create more personalized and valuable experiences for shoppers across the path to purchase. When we work with CPGs, agencies, and affiliates, we really engage with them across 3 main commercial businesses. Our insights business, loyalty marketing, and our retail media arm, Kroger Precision Marketing.
Barbara, the 8451, is that a function of pi, or where did that name come from?
8451 is, it's actually the longitudinal coordinates of Cincinnati, which is both where Kroger and 8451 are headquartered. So there are sort of several special things about the name. One, of course, being a nod to our home. Yeah. The other is, of course, it is a name of numbers, and we are led and driven by data. And being the longitudinal coordinates, it also is a reminder for us of the longitudinal approach we take to analysis and collaboration with all of our partners.
I would have loved to be in the room when the agency proposed that name and everybody went, their heads kind of tilted, and then it all kind of, hey, it does make sense.
It makes a good conversation topic.
It does. Well, thanks for sharing. We'll get into more about the current evolving consumer patterns and spending and brand choice. It's a very dynamic environment as consumers adjust to food inflation. But I want to start out with your thoughts on any bigger changes around consumer behavior post-COVID. The COVID era, I've described it sometimes as a broomstick in a bicycle spoke. It really did seem to change some fundamental things, particularly around food and nutrition. What have you tracked, and how are you guys thinking about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as we think about some of the big, large-scale shifts that have happened in both consumer shopping behavior and relationships with food and health, there are really several big things that the pandemic brought on. First, from a shopping standpoint, it was certainly a catalyst for what we've seen in the US as just a massive acceleration of e-commerce adoption. It happened at the beginning because people had to for personal safety. And then, of course, it stuck for many reasons because of the convenience that it provides. The second sort of big shift that happened was because of all the quarantining, we saw a big growth in food consumption at home, and this shift from away from home and restaurants back to the kitchen table. And we see this as a shift that's or a trend that's really stuck today for several reasons. One is that while people started doing it because they had to, many found that they enjoyed cooking and eating at home. And several found that it is a way that they could eat healthier and have more control over the food that they put in their body. And then the last is, as inflation rose, it's a more economical option for many folks versus eating out. And so many are choosing to sort of continue doing it because it is cheaper. And the sort of last big shift, I'd say, that came from the pandemic was really sentiment around health. Certainly, there was heightened awareness around health safety, say when the pandemic started, but it also brought with it a lot of heightened awareness around mental health and more holistic and sustainable health as well. That certainly carries through today as people are less concerned with sort of contracting COVID, but still considering how they can have more like preventative health measures and live a long, healthy life.
Interesting. I want to dive into that for sure. Quick question. One of the characteristics of shopping during COVID was fewer trips and huge baskets, right? I've had retailers tell me that they're seeing more. It's kind of resumed a little bit. It has changed a bit. Fewer trips, bigger baskets, and then something I've called cash flow shopping. And I wonder if you've detected this, where consumers are shopping, and instead of spending more money on a bigger value item, they're spending less money. Ultimately on their budget, it's a little less per ounce more expensive, but they're watching their wallets a little closer. Any of those two things resonate with you?
We see both of those things happening, actually. So as we look at the rise of inflation and how different consumers are leveraging different tactics to stretch their budgets, some are buying in bulk. So you said they are looking at they can get a cheaper per ounce price by buying more today. And that's a way that they can save money in the long term. Yeah. Many others also have a fixed budget. And so in order to get all the things they need on their list, we see them trading down to smaller sizes. We also see a shift where there are many customers who are making more frequent, smaller trips. So we see sort of both ends of the spectrum happening, and it really highlights the fact that everyone has different constraints and everyone is navigating this environment where you have inflation and constrained budgets differently based on the the tools that they have and the resources that they have to pull on and how it can best fit into both their habit and their budgets.
So interesting. Now let's dive into the health a little bit, because it really fascinates me. This and you would be aware of it, the trend, the food is nutrition trend, which is kind of maybe a natural outgrowth, so to speak, of non-GMO, plant-based, cleaner ingredient decks, more local. Are these phrases kind of resonating with you? You're seeing more interest in this, whether it's from COVID or just people kind of coming to the fact that food is nutrition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we actually did a study at the turn of the new year last year, because, having healthier or making healthier choices is always top of folks' list as they're setting New Year's resolutions. And what came out was more of a focus on thinking about the functional benefits of food.
Right.
And what we saw is there are some differences that come when we think about what shoppers of different demographics and age cohorts are looking for. So as one example, heart health is a functional benefit that's sought really across the spectrum. But while weight management is top of the list for customers that are 35 and older, the younger demographic of shoppers prioritizes more functional benefits around energy and gut health. So we can also see their shifts being in how people are defining health and what aspects of health are most important to them. You also asked a bit about labels and claims. We track this because it is, especially as you think about even the natural organic space and non-GMO, there are, and 100% natural, there are a lot of claims that brands and retailers can lean on to resonate with shoppers. And what we try to do is make sure that we're keeping a pulse on what matters to them and what resonates with them. And one of the interesting things that came out recently is that even more important than 100% natural or non-GMO, the top claim that our shoppers were looking for is guaranteed fresh. And I think that indicates sort of a convergence of several things coming together. One is the prioritization of the quality of food that we put in our bodies. And the other is that if you are eating food that is guaranteed fresh, there's also an opportunity there to reduce waste and stretch your dollars, because you're ensuring that the food that you buy won't go bad. And so there can be this connection then between eating healthy and being fiscally responsible and making good choices for the environment. So we can think about health as an opportunity within the products that we make and sell to hit on multiple benefits for customers.
I wonder if we could dig a bit more into what's going on with private brands, because it seems not just Kroger, but lots of places are reporting pretty dramatic increases. And on the one hand, I can see where if you're really budget constrained, you sort of settle or feel forced to try a lesser option. Mm-hmm. But it also could be, I think, particularly because so many companies have gone from, beyond sort of private label to really building private brands as strong alternatives to national brands at a better price. So I'm wondering the degree to which people is I'm sort of forced to do it. I'll put up with it for a while, but maybe when their economic circumstances improve, inflation comes down, hopefully at some point, they're back to where they were. But it could also be they've discovered, why am I paying all this extra money for these brands, and actually this is the same or maybe even better. So do you have any perspective on what of this behavior might persist if economic conditions were to improve?
It really depends on whether the products are able to meet customers' expectations. A lot of what we've seen within the Kroger ecosystem is that some customers may have tried private label for the first time because they were trading down, and then found that they didn't actually have to sacrifice quality in order to save money. Now, I think this is true for both national brands and private label brands, that you winning on price alone is never going to create stickiness and loyalty long term. You need to connect with the customer and make sure that the product tastes good, first of all, even in healthy categories where we're looking for health benefits. The number one attribute for customers in making a product decision is, does it taste good?
Sure.
And does the product connect with me on a more personal level? So the The stickiness for private label brands, I'd say, is going to have the same challenge as the stickiness for national brands. Mm-hmm. We see that the definitions around brand loyalty as a whole are evolving. We asked customers earlier this year to help define for us how they consider themselves to be brand loyal. And only 5% of customers said that being brand loyal to them meant that it's the only brand that they buy.
Right.
So brand loyalty no longer guarantees exclusivity. Sure. Rather, the vast majority of customers say, it's on a spectrum for me of it's based on my purchases is for me what brand loyalty means, or it's a preference.
I was going to say, there's a difference between preference and loyalty.
Right? And some even say it just means it's a brand in my consideration set.
Yeah.
And so just how we historically have thought about brand loyalty is different from how consumers today are thinking about brand loyalty. So there's a real imperative to make sure that you are re-earning your place in every single basket, and that's true across the spectrum.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. So let's maybe shift gears to what's going on in the world of digital, harmonized retail, unified commerce, what have you. Yeah. We saw this acceleration in e-commerce growth during the pandemic. Some of it's persisted, maybe not as much as some people thought. I'm curious what you're seeing about sort of the broader world of how customers think about digital channels versus store channels. I often argue that the customer should be the channel. They don't necessarily spend so much time thinking about channels. I don't know if that's kind of what you've learned, but what are you seeing there?
Yeah. The pandemic certainly accelerated e-commerce adoption. But what we don't see is a massive shift between customers saying, I only shop in store or I only shop online. Even the most e-com loyal households within the Kroger ecosystem are spending about 40% of their trips in store.
Yeah.
Not only that, we asked customers, how do you think about what you'll want, or what you anticipate you'll want in the shopping experience of the future? And across all age groups, 70% of them say, I'm still going to want to shop in stores in the future. Now, there's a greater acceptance and anticipation of adoption of pickup and delivery in the future, but not at the expense of also continuing to shop in store. So what's really important for retailers is to think about it from a customer perspective and say, customer wants choices.
What a concept.
Right? Customers don't have the same silos that we do internally in organizations. I think a lot of companies still have an e-commerce team and a digital team that might be separate from a team that works in brick and mortar. And a customer just thinks of it at different ways that I can get my shopping trip on a Monday night versus a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
And so delivering a more seamless experience for customers where you are, yes, leveraging the benefits that each channel can provide uniquely, but also creating consistency where it matters most for customers are the ones that are going to win. And what we see is that digital and e-commerce certainly provides a greater opportunity to deliver personalized experiences. You can create different content and products that show up for one person versus the next based on when they log in. You can't do that in store. Right. But what the in-store experience can provide uniquely is appealing to all the senses. And it's a place where you can still have in-store sampling. You can smell food when you're coming in the holiday season. You can see Gen merch across the aisles and sort of like feel the season around you that is more inviting for exploration and discovery. What customers say that they really prioritize being consistent across e-commerce and in-store is value. So they want the same prices and they want the same promotions to be available across both. So knowing where you can pull on different benefits and levers between in-store and e-commerce while also creating consistency is really the key unlock.
Well, and I think that gets back to what you said earlier. And I think, I always think of brands, we're, like you said, retailers tend to historically be organized vertically, right? But brands in the consumer's mind are really horizontal. Like, I just see this brand I'm shopping with, and we go back and forth so seamlessly often between different channels, and sometimes I'm researching online, buying in store, sometimes I'm going to the store, then buying later. Sometimes I want it delivered, sometimes I want to pick it up, sometimes I'm going to go in the store. So I just think this blur is persistent, and oftentimes we just make these false distinctions between, well, this is e-commerce, which is sometimes, well, it's how it's ordered, right? It's also not how it's fulfilled. So there's a lot of, I think, nuance here that is often not appreciated when we talk about it at a high level.
There's even blurring of lines within a single shopping trip. So we see many customers go online to check out deals, but still do their trip in store. There are customers that are checking the app in store to locate products and figure out what aisle they're on. And so
is that e-commerce?
Even the notion of there being a clear line and distinction isn't true anymore in a world where you have digitally influenced in-store sales and you have technology then coming into the in-store experience, either through our handheld devices or through technology that stores are leveraging in their own footprint and environment. Creates a lot of new opportunities for us to connect with customers in different ways, but will force the industry to break down some of the silos we've had.
Yeah. What do you say often, Steve, a distinction without a difference increasingly, right? Which I love the phrase. A quick question off the script. You've been in this business a long time looking at consumer data. If you and I, or the three of us, were sitting down 10 years ago having this conversation, would you think that consumers would be farther ahead in terms of shopping online? I mean, we looked around the world. We saw the UK. We saw South Korea. We saw double-digit numbers, 15, 18, 22%. I mean, pre-pandemic, the industry's 1, 2, whatever kind of percent. We got a boost in the pandemic.
Right.
But we're still not significant in the way it is in different places around the world, right? So are you surprised, I guess it would be my question?
Yes and no. I'll answer it in a couple parts. So one is, we think 10 years ago, we were all looking at Europe, and we were saying e-commerce is coming. Look at these other markets where it is much more adopted and embedded into shopping routines in a way that it isn't in the U.S. And so there was a lot of energy and aspiration around how do we get to 50% of our shopping trips moving online. I think what we've now moved to is it may not be dependent on the number or a hard milestone of when is it going to be 50%, because we're also a different landscape. As you have more rural spaces and even suburban footprints, the e-commerce adoption looks different than when you're in a very urban setting where the shopping trip and routine for customers is just different. Right. And so I think what has been the big surprise is the notion of having this omni-channel hybrid shopping experience, whereas 10 years ago, there was a thought that it was going to be binary, and you were going to move from one to the other.
Well, and I think a couple quick comments on that. I think, because distribution tended to be lined up, there's e-commerce fulfillment, it's a thing, there's store fulfillment, and kind of never the twain shall meet. Yeah. There wasn't, as much appreciation for what that was going to look like. And even some of the earlier models were sort of chasing, going back even to like Webvan or something like that, we're sort of chasing, be the Amazon of grocery e-commerce, right? The other thing, which and is why I was always skeptical about the penetration rates, is at some point, I think the more people started to appreciate that the more you grew e-commerce, and that I mean more shipping stuff to people, the more money you lost. I always thought that people at a certain point are going to say, we're not going to keep investing a lot more money to lose a lot more money, and that at some point was going to slow down or force people, I think, in a way, if you look at, say, what Target has done to say, well, we're not going to try to out Amazon. We're going to have to figure out a way to fulfill that actually gives us an opportunity to serve customers better, but also gives us an opportunity to make money. Yeah. So I think, that was always a little bit problematic in terms of the path to much greater numbers than we still see today.
Yeah. There was also, I think, much more focus in the early days on trying to understand, is it an incremental purchase? Is e-com cannibalizing the in-store trip? And how do we make sure that we are truly driving incrementality as people move from one channel to the other? And I think there's also been a greater appreciation for just winning all the trips.
Right.
Yeah. And so if you want to keep customers within your ecosystem, you need more options for them. And it's less about trying to push them to one or the other and more about having the options available so they can choose to use one method and have the choice for one of those methods to be fulfilled by you.
Right.
Yeah, right on. I mean, I've described that kind of discussion around cannibalization like arguing about gravity. Like, it's going to happen. How do you structure your organization around it? Last question for you, and of course, we can't have a guest without saying the magic words AI and data and all those things. So how do you infuse, where is the organization at in terms of, taking data? You're steeped in data to begin with. Is it at another level now that you've got AI? Can it be the other level? Is it? Where are you at? Where are you at with that, and how do you think about it?
Yep. So how we think about it is new tools that enable us to better understand what our customers truly need and want, and then both also deliver more personalized, relevant experiences for them. And it's leveraging all the technology advancements and advanced analytics and AI personalization to do a better job on both ends of those spectrums, understanding the behavior and then delivering unique experiences based on that understanding. So I'll share, we've got 3 examples of how we're doing that today. One is, as we think about understanding customer behavior, it is enabling us to do that in a faster way. So by applying large language models to customer surveys and feedback, we're able to now summarize and theme up top trends that emerge in a matter of minutes versus what would have historically taken days. So it actually helps us elevate the voice of the customer faster so that we can penetrate it across the organization in a quicker way.
Yeah, super interesting.
The second way we do this is through the digital experience. And so we are leveraging algorithms to improve the experience that each shopper has as they are navigating the site. And it is specifically then improving search algorithms and then also even substitution. And so we think about this as, hey, AI and personalization is enabling us to make it easier for customers to find what they are looking for and make the shopping trip as easy as possible for them. And then the last one is that we're able to better deliver more personalized content and value to customers beyond the shelf. Whereas I think if you go through a physical store on the shelf, you've got one price point that you're able to deliver. And through personalization, we're able to deliver personalized, customized coupons and offers to shoppers based on the brands and categories that they love. And so by doing that, we're able to increase digital engagement and penetration and also deliver more tangible, relevant value back to customers.
Rogers and Pepper's 1-to-1 at last. Delivered.
We waited long enough.
Everything
we dreamed of will happen.
Well, Barbara, thanks so much for joining us here in the Vantage Podcast studio. Grocery Shop's been a real treat getting to know you and learn what's going on at Kroger. Very impressive work, and so thanks again for joining us on the Remarkable Retail Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you like what you heard, please follow us on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform so you can catch up with all our great episodes, including renowned author, entrepreneur, and leadership teacher Seth Godin, talking about his incredibly timely and urgent book, The Song of Significance, a new manifesto for teams. And be sure and drop us that 5-star review where you listen to your podcasts. It really helps us spread the word.
And I'm Steve Dennis, strategy and innovation consultant, keynote speaker, and author of the best-selling book, Remarkable Retail, How to Win and Keep Customers in the Age of Disruption. You can learn more about me at stephenpdennis.com, and be sure to follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Threads, and Instagram.
And I'm Michael LeBlanc, consumer retail growth consultant, keynote speaker, producer, and host of a series of retail trade podcasts, including this one. You can learn more about me on LinkedIn. Safe travels, everybody.